Alright, this is Kyle back with you, with continuing my discussion about the money system in the world and how the corporatocracy, which is coming up soon, that word, is taking over completely. And to recap, we discussed that how money is made, not earned, and for every dollar, it's a dollar in debt. I hope you remember the first video, as there will be somewhat of a recap, and but first we will continue the discussion. More on the monetary system. December 9th, 1968, Jerome Daly, you can look him up through Wikipedia, had his house foreclosed upon. He challenged, saying both parties, he and the bank, didn't put up real property for the house. He had his tangible home. The bank had nothing, since money was just created from nothing. I'll keep this short. You can read the link. He won. The judge said he was right, and even added only God can create something out of nothing. He kept his home. Yes, the bank appealed and bullied people. But credit card debt, home debt, doesn't exist since money is all counterfeit. These legal proceedings are ignored and suppressed, though, so Big Brother always wins. Just look at the broad spectrum. Everyone says money is power. Money really doesn't exist, so the government suppose rich people only have power through fear and people's ignorance. No, I'm not calling anyone ignorant, you're just not exposed to the truth yet. When Lincoln was president, he created the greenback, a debt-free currency. Then, a part of a memo between British and American people when Lincoln was president said, "Slavery is but owning of land and carries with it the care of laborers," while the European plan is that capital shall control laborers through wages. Parentheses, to me this means everyone is still slave, which has extreme circumstances, especially with Obama's current bitch and moan fest saying we owe blacks for once being slaves. This rule that this rules that is impossible since everyone is essentially a slave. And parentheses, and this person also called that slavery. The federal government is a system of modern slavery. At the end of the day, the slave masters are the banks, the Federal Reserve, and who controls the Federal Reserves? The government. And they in turn own the government, and a man named James Rothschild, you can look him up too, has a lot to do with the Federal Reserve and his family. Who's head of the government right now? A black man. So a black man is in charge of millions of slaves of all races. The Federal Reserve, or central bank, is one of the biggest scams ever created. Now, not yet is a solution that will ultimately be found, but it already exists, it just needs put into place. Debt that really doesn't exist is an invisible weapon in our game of Russian roulette to control people, enslave people, keep people in poverty, and people supposedly rich and powerful. Interest, which really cannot exist since money doesn't, is the prime ammunition in the gun you're playing Russian roulette with. The banks are in collusion with the government and own the government to expand their economic warfare against nations. This brought about the birth of the World Bank. This is a quote by John Adams, 1735 to 1826. There is two ways to kill man. One is with a sword, the other is with debt. End quote. John Perkins, former chief economist for Chas T. Main Inc., author Confessions of an Economic Hitman, speaks about finding a country, then arranging a huge loan from the World Bank or one of its sister groups, but the loan never goes to the country, it goes to big companies to build power plants, infrastructures, things of that nature to cause more debt. It helps a few rich people, but more are worse off. The entire country holds a huge debt, so therefore the bank/government steps in and says, "Sell your oil, let us build military bases, etc." The system works as the World Bank puts a country in so much debt that it can't pay it. Then they offer to refinance that debt and add even more interest, which in turn causes them to sell their resources as basic collateral: school systems, oil, utility companies, penal systems, insurance systems, and more. In Iran in 1953, Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh, I'm probably mispronouncing that, Prime Minister from 1951 to 1953, he was trying to help Iran get out of debt. We didn't like that, but didn't send the military. Instead, sent in Curly Roosevelt, one of Teddy Roosevelt's relatives, in the CIA, and in a short period of time he got Mohammed kicked out of office. Then their dictatorship took place. The USA was happy it done it so cheap they began a whole new reign of control over countries. The problem with Roosevelt, the curly one, was he was a card-carrying member of the CIA, and if caught, the ramifications would be disastrous. So they began using consultants and channeling money through the World Bank. You can look up World Bank for reference, or the IMF, International Monetary Fund, you can also look that up, or one such agency. That way, if such people like John Perkins got caught, there would be no government ramifications. In Guatemala, Jacoby Arbenz Guzman, president from 1951 to 1954, Guatemala, big into United Fruit Company, he wanted to give the rights back to the people and the money back to people. A huge press campaign was set forth in the US and Russia for the Congress, President, Senate, media, press, citizens to convince them this man, Jacobo, was needed taken out, and he was. We sent in soldiers called to take him out. The person who took over reinstated the United Fruit Company and undone everything Jacobo done. I apologize, my dog was barking. In Ecuador, 1981, it had been run by pro-US dictators prior to Jaime Roldos Aguilera, president 1979 to 1981. His main goal was to see Ecuador's resources help the people. He won his elections hands down and began implementing policies to see the profits from oil help the people. That didn't make the US happy, so they sent in people to coerce him, saying he'd get rich and his family if he played USA ball, but he didn't want to do that. He chose not to listen and was killed in a plane crash. He and his family died in the quote crash. The entire site was cordoned off, and two of the key witnesses died in fires days later. In 1981, Omar Torrijos, I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name, in Panama, just had been attempted to be bribed by the USA to change its country from independence, which did not work. He renegotiated the rights to the Panama Canal with President Jimmy Carter. 2 months later, he went down in a plane crash. One of the security guards had handed him a small tape recorder, and inside it was a bomb. In 2002, President Hugo Chavez of Venezuela wanted their oil to help their country. This after decades of corrupt presidents in that country. The USA didn't want that, so we arranged a coup. It was just like what Roosevelt done in the past, and then it was going on now as far as white people and the cops are going on in this country right now. We paid people to go in the streets and riot, saying the president was bad. Sound familiar with what blacks are doing to whites and cops? Nowadays here, a coup against white people and cops is going on, paid for by the government and Jews. Here and there, it makes it look like the entire country when it's only a few 100,000 people. Excuse me. It's not proven. George Soros, a Jewish hedge fund investor, spent $33 million to fund the riots in Ferguson, Missouri. You can look that up too. However, in Venezuela, They overcame that because they backed the president so much. In Iraq, in 2003, the first step in that is the economic hitman. If the economic hitman fail, then bribe, they go to jackals, go in and either overthrow the government or assassinate people. Both failed with Saddam Hussein in 91. We took on the Iraq troops in Desert Storm via George Bush Sr.'s orders. We figured once we took out the military he would come around. That didn't work. So finally we took him out and won essentially the country, and it was a great deal for construction companies to basically rebuild that country. Then we subtly built an empire around the world. Germans, French, etc. built empires over the centuries knowing what they were doing. Most citizens have no idea we have an empire living off the benefits of a clandestine empire. The presidents are not emperors, but every empire has one. We have what this man, John Perkins, calls a corporatocracy. His word meaning the people who run the biggest businesses, World Bank, JP Morgan, Federal Reserve, Exxon, Halliburton, Capital One, IMF, CIA, etc. They own the media, resources, and everything else, and act as the emperor of our empire. They control utilities, GE, and more. They control media, Hollywood, politicians, through financing their campaigns. The next thing you know, the president of, say, Halliburton, or an oil industry, George Bush Jr., for example, but there are many others, quickly they transfer from their industry of being part of the emperor to being in the government, president, vice president, senate, etc., then go back and forth. Most of our companies, or most of our government is invisible, and most policies are forged and run through by big companies, i.e. this TAA trade plan Obama rushed through. They all work to one goal: maximize profits regardless of environmental cost. That is John Perkins' quote, not mine. I'll stop here for now and continue within a couple days. Remember, I'll put this all out there in one swoop soon. Be back with you soon. Again, sorry there is no picture.